Ladies and gentlemen, my name is Renaud Dehousse. I happen to be the president of the European University, and I'm very happy to welcome you here in that capacity. The acoustics aren't ideal in this beautiful room, as you may notice. And so we'll try to adjust. It's a privilege to be here, but there are a number of slight downsides that we have to accept. Let me say that I'm very happy to be here to open this conference. As it happens, I remember the days, not so distant, where trade matters were of interest to only very small groups of people. It's not so far away, and yet, as we all know, the world has really changed. I mean, I was this morning at a very different exercise, a training session for young administrators, and of course, there was a discussion about trade issues. I'm not sure you would have learned much, but I take this as evidence of the great social relevance of the kind of problems that are discussed in this conference. Indeed, we all know that nowadays there's much attention for those issues. Some might say too much attention for them to be discussed seriously. But let's look at the positive side of it. It means that the contributions that you can make, both in your capacity as scholars, practitioners, policymakers, and so on and so forth, are much more noticed than they used to be, and certainly, let's say, have a much greater impact than in the past, which is why we at the European University Institute are extremely happy about this opportunity to welcome this conference. I mean, there is, and I say this sitting next to Brigid Laffan, the director of the Robert Schuman Center, there is a long-standing interest of the Robert Schuman Center for those issues. Professor Hoekman is, of course, a towering figure in this endeavor, and this is something that will not fade away. I want to stress this. I'm sure the issue will remain with us for some time. Its academic interest is great. Its social relevance is even greater. And we have therefore all good reasons to keep paying attention to those issues. We are extremely happy, too, of the opportunity that we are given to do this in a partnership with the Trade Policy Research Network, in that it's an important way for us to reach out. I mean, we all know that academic institutions may at times be a bit too inward-looking, and they're faced with all sorts of invitations to reach out to a broader audience. The partnership we have with the World Trade Institute is also very dear to our heart, because it's a partnership with dare I say, a neighbor, because we are, after all, so close. Switzerland is, in fact, if not in law, an associate member of the European University, and we are in the process of renewing our bonds to that neighboring country. We therefore view this meetings as just one more illustration of the great many ties that unite our higher education institutions together, and therefore welcome the opportunity to do together some good job. I'm sure that the discussions you will have in the next few sessions will be of great interest, that they will be passionate, as they ought to be, when one discusses matter of great relevance. And I wish you a very stimulating conference and a very pleasant stay here at the European University Institute. Thank you.
Good afternoon, everyone. I begin by introducing myself. I'm Brigid Laffan. I'm director of the Robert Schuman Centre that hosts the Global Governance Programme, of which Bernard's group is a part. It's a great pleasure to add to the welcome from our president. The Global Governance Programme is one of the new programmes at the Robert Schuman Centre. It began in 2009. And it was, in a sense, established to do two things. One, to make sure that at the EUI we dealt with questions that were global in reach and in importance, and not just European. In other words, to move beyond a heavy focus on regionalism to global issues, but also to help internationalize the EUI itself. Because in the 1970s, when the EUI was established, bringing Europeans together was innovative at the time, but now bringing Europeans together, given the living system that is Europe and all of the connections, it's now parochial. So the Global Governance Programme helps us not just address global issues, but also further internationalise the EUI. The Robert Schuman Centre is very committed to bringing the world of scholarship and the world of practice together, and I notice that there are many of you who work at the cutting edge in the living system, both in terms of national and international organisations, and that's really important. Also, we're a very small institution. Although the EUI is one of the largest social science institutions in Europe, we're still very small. I think when I look to the resources that we have in trade, then they're very thin, but by partnerships, it really helps us amplify. It really helps us amplify our resources and our reach. And one of the things I've learned since I came to Florence is that to the EUI, that one of the magic things about this place is it has extraordinary convening power. When you invite people to come to Florence, they either say yes, or if they can't, they say, please ask me again. So that's one of the ways in which that we can, in a sense, strengthen what is a relatively small institution. I'm also very pleased to see that there will be a book, because obviously conferences are transient, and it's really important for the European University Institute and the Schuman Centre that there is a scholarly legacy from your deliberations. So I'm very glad to see that there will be a book. And finally, just to add to what the President said, of course you're dealing with a very hot topic, and despite all of the technicalities that are involved in trade policy is now politicised both at the domestic level and also at an interregional level. And so for that reason, you are operating in a much more contested environment, a much more politicised environment. Trade was always political, but it's political in a slightly different way now. So we're very pleased that you're here. We wish you a very fruitful 2 days. And I hand over now so that you can begin to get to Professor Hoekman, so that you can begin to get to the meat of your subject. Thank you.
Bernard's actually asked me to go first, so yeah, that's true. So I'm Joe Francois. I'm the Managing Director at the World Trade Institute. I'll say thanks first off to the EUI for what's going to be a tremendous 2 days, and to all of you for being here. In a sense, I'm being selfish. I get to sit and listen to all of you talk about things I find interesting. So the World Trade Forum itself has been broadened a bit in the last 2 years, and this year represents a number of changes. Indeed, there's a continued emphasis with the book projects on academic study of issues affecting the trading system, but also there's a stronger emphasis with the plenaries, for example, in getting interaction between researchers and stakeholders. Okay, so there's a mix of policymakers here and people who study policy, and this is on purpose. partly to make sure that on the research side that the things that we look at are the things that actually seem policy relevant. There's lots of things that are interesting analytically, but maybe nobody else cares about. So the things on the program here, the intent is that we focus on big questions, right? And indeed, there's a number of them that we'll be talking about for the next 2 days. Globalization broadly, how do we manage it? How do we understand what's going on? What about stakeholder concerns? What about the distribution of gains and losses given how we manage the system itself? Again, not small questions, and I'm sad that we have parallel sessions because I can't listen to everything, but that's how it goes. And in addition, so the World Trade Forum, when it was started, which was my predecessor, Thomas Gauthier, was primarily focused on what we're doing in the next 2 days. We're trying to expand the forum to also cover sort of periodic, let's say, policy roundtables and things of that sort. So again, you're part of the community for that, where we would use it as a framework in which to sit down and discuss, sometimes closed and sometimes open door, on more narrower sets of issues. And so I look forward to seeing all of you in various venues and so on, not just annually, but as we move on through the year. And again, thank you to EUI for all the clear work that's gone into making sure this is going to be a great 2 days.
Okay, let me also add my welcome to you all. Despite what Brigid said, I know there are a number of you in this room who have been invited multiple times, and this is the first time you've come, so I think we are making progress. You know who you are. Just a few words about the program itself. As you know, we have a series of plenary sessions, 3 plenary sessions and a number of parallel sessions. And the plenaries are essentially, we've tried to kind of focus them on some of the hot topics of the day, but not just the hot topics politically, but also hot topics from kind of a broader perspective, including economic development, right? And I think that's one of the things we want to do in the context of this conference, which is really about World Trade Forum. So it's not just about the EU and the US and the North Atlantic, although that's an important part of the equation, but it's also in terms of trade and development, which really is one of the issues that relates to this debate that we're having collectively on globalization. Just a few things on the program, given that everybody is now in the room, so I'll just do a little bit of housekeeping. So the parallel sessions may or may not have a chair. If there's no chair, I would ask the discussant to act as a chair, so therefore you can both abuse your position as chair while being a discussant, which is not necessarily a bad thing. There is one mistake in the program in parallel H, which Lionel Fontanier is mentioned as a speaker, but in practice that is supposed to be Jacques Pelkmans. So those of you who want to hear Jacques, please make a note that he will be speaking in that particular parallel session. So that's it in terms of the introductory elements, and I think we can now invite the panel forward, the first panel, and we'll get going.